Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Katya. I'm joined by my two incredible co-founders, Mallory and Ariel, and we are the founding team of Inheritance Project. We have spent the last 3 years helping organizations from wide, diverse backgrounds, such as big global companies to local governments to nonprofits, create better collaboration and resolve some of their most challenging conflict between teams and individuals. And we do this work through the lens of inheritance. And when I say inheritance and you hear Inheritance Project, you are probably thinking about money and property, things that you are left by previous generations. But that is not what we are talking about when we talk about inheritance. We're actually talking about the ancestry, culture, beliefs, values, stories, social conditions, traits, and perspectives that all of us receive from past generations. And our inheritance is so much more than these physical items that are passed down from one generation to the next. It really is the accumulation of all of your unique lived experiences that shape how you live, how you think, and how you connect with others. And there are different types of inheritance that we help people to understand and unpack. There is personal inheritance, there's also organizational inheritance, and we're going to be talking a lot about our own inheritance today and how that actually led us to create this company together. And as we are talking and sharing, if there are different things you inherited that are connecting for you while we're talking, share them in the comments with us. You know, if there's something that you inherited from your family, maybe it's something you inherited from society, maybe it's something you inherited in your organization. We work with a lot of organizations that come to us and say, this is the lore that we inherited about the way things are, right? This is how we do things. And what we do as a company is we offer a space in which you get to ask yourself, is what I've inherited really serving me now? Are the things, behaviors, beliefs, perspectives, the way things are that we inherited, is it really serving the future and legacy that we want to make? And we help you unpack that inheritance and actually make conscious choices about what kind of legacy you want to leave. And today we're celebrating our 3rd birthday. Honestly, I can believe it. I'm really so proud and grateful of all the work that we have done. And it's incredible that we have spent 3 years doing this work. So we're here today to look back at the beginning, to open up for the first time about the origin story, how we created this company, and also how we came up with the 7 skills for challenging conversations that we are teaching in our upcoming leadership immersion. And we have a few topics we're going to speak about, but we're also open to your questions. And if you have a burning question, please ask it in the comments. We'll try to leave space at the end. And we will be asking each other questions as well. So before we jump into that, I want to take a moment for each of us to introduce ourselves properly and share about our journey creating Inheritance Project. So I'm actually going to pass the microphone first to you, Mallory, to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Katya. Hi, everyone. For those of you I don't know, my name is Mallory, and a little bit about my own inheritance. I was born in Singapore to a Chinese Singaporean mother and French-American father. And when I was about 2 years old, we moved to Northwest London to a really diverse neighborhood. And I think growing up in this multicultural family and environment in my upbringing really shaped the way that I saw the world and became really interested in how to bring different groups of people together to collaborate effectively, especially groups who, like my parents, might be coming from complete opposite sides of the world, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions, different worldviews, different ways of seeing the world in each other. And that inevitably can create a lot of diversity and beauty and different ideas. And also that can create a lot of conflict and challenges and misunderstandings and the inability to work together. And so my upbringing, coupled with my later studies in conflict resolution and facilitation, and my early career as a strategy consultant at Deloitte Consulting, and then a specialist facilitator of executive strategy sessions are some of what I bring to this team. But it's all I think what really motivates me is giving a space where people can understand each other better so that we can better work together, better create solutions, ideas. You know, the world that we're in right now is facing a lot of challenges. Probably every organization that you work in has its own fair share of challenges, the economy, the environmental situation. We need to be able to work together and access the most of our human creativity and collaboration at this time in history. And yet, so often, our inheritance, our culture, all of these aspects that shape our worldview hold us back from really being able to work effectively with other people on our team. So that's a big part of what motivates me. And I'll pass the mic to Ariel to share a bit more about your background and entry point into this work.
Thanks so much, Mallory. And hi, everybody. My name is Ariel Figueroa. And like Mallory, I also came from a multicultural and multi-faith family. So my father was Puerto Rican from the Bronx, and my mother was Jewish. And growing up between these two communities and two cultures, there was this search from a very young age around, how do I fit in? Where do I belong? And had the sense from a very, very early age that I wasn't quite as Puerto Rican as my Puerto Rican relatives, and I wasn't fully part of that community. And I wasn't quite as Jewish as my Jewish relatives. And this kind of came up in all throughout my childhood, into my adolescence, and to the point where around the time in high school, I made up my own category because I didn't fit into any of the boxes that were easily definable. And I started telling people I'm Jurican, and people laugh, but they immediately get it. They're like, "Oh, you're your own brand." And so part of my journey in life has been around seeing how to understand other people in a more nuanced way, and seeing how people relate to their identity and how they relate to their sense of belonging and where they feel they belong. So I studied sociology in college, and then went on to become an educator, and worked with students of all different ages, from early childhood all the way to college. And kind of the through line of my career, both as an educator and as well as a yoga teacher and a healer, has been creating spaces where people feel that they have the room and the sense of expansiveness um, to kind of push into the edge of their own sense of themselves. And that could look like healing, that could look like transforming ideas, that could look like coming into a different relationship with self or other. And that's really how I found my way to Inheritance Project. Eventually, I started doing retreats and started to look to work with companies. And soon after, I met Katya and Mallory, and decided to join our energies together to create what is now Inheritance Project. But I'll pause there, and I'll pass it over to you, Katya.
Thanks, Ariel. I always love hearing both of your stories, and I'm reminded why I was drawn to both of you in the first place. Fun fact, I met both Mallory and Ariel on different dance floors. We are a team that loves to dance and move our body, and I really felt like I got to know them before I even knew their names, in a really, really unique way. And we'll talk more about how we use movement and somatic practice in our work. But I always am reminded that I made the right choice in inviting both of you to join this company. And I'll share a bit about myself, and I'll share a bit about the origin of Inheritance Project, because they're so connected. My name is Katya Stepanov, but I was actually born Yekaterina Olegovna Stepanova. That's my full birth name. I was born in Minsk, Belarus, which had just become its own country again. It was 4 days after the USSR had formally collapsed. And so I was born into a country that to this day has a confused identity, that had belonged to the Soviet Union and became Belarus right when I was born. So I was born into this chaos of identity. And in the Soviet Union, I would have been seen as not a Russian person. My mother is Jewish and my father is Russian Orthodox. So in this mixed faith family, it was actually seen as a mixed cultural family because Jewish people were not perceived as Russian in the Soviet Union. And we actually immigrated to the United States as Jewish refugees in 1992. And so this identity that my mother had been persecuted for her entire life in the Soviet Union actually became the reason that she was able to leave this country and move to the United States in the first place. And when we came to the US, we were welcomed by this Jewish community that expected us to know anything about Judaism. But we had spent 70 years in Soviet communist culture where everyone was conditioned to be anti-theist and not have a belief in God. And so this is a really interesting, this origin point really illustrates why my whole life's journey became about understanding identity and understanding how much of ourselves are shaped by our inherited culture, by our parents and the way they see the world, and how much of it is made up by us in our lived experience. And so my household, when I was growing up, had one ontology, one way of viewing the world, a belief system around success and happiness and conflict and leadership that was in complete contradiction to the American communities that I was being raised in, the school system that I was going to. And so I had both this incredible challenge growing up and this incredible gift. The challenge was feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere, which I think is mirrored in some of the stories we've all shared, where I'm not Russian enough or Belarusian enough to be Belarusian, but I'm not American enough to be American. And how much of those identities even make up the person that is me. And from a very young age, I understood that we all inherit a certain worldview, and then we have a responsibility to decide if that worldview is one that we actually want to adopt and enact in our lifetime. And I became a storyteller right away because the other piece that fits into our work and why I was inspired to start this company is I realized the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves and the stories we are told about who we are and the stories we tell ourselves and each other about each other are the foundation for how we behave towards one another. And so if we can really investigate these stories and ask ourselves, is this story that I have about me or this other person that I inherited from my culture, from my upbringing, is it helping to connect me with others, or is it helping to separate me from others? And I started to realize a lot of the stories that we inherit are designed to divide us rather than bring us closer together, and that I wanted to do something to change that. So I studied acting. I went to school for acting. I graduated from acting school. I became a facilitator. I became a team building game designer for a company for a while. And I started to recognize that we needed new ways of connecting to one another and understanding who we are beyond all the boxes that we're being asked to check on the census, or beyond, the first sentence of, "Hi, my name is Katya." And immediately people would ask me, "Well, where are you from? Where are you really from?" And try to understand who I am. And while that sometimes was annoying, I understood that underneath that was a really true desire to understand who I was and understand me in my nuance and complexity. And so in my life, I became inspired to use all of my skills as a storyteller, facilitator, as a yoga and mindfulness teacher to create a blueprint, an experience where we can actually investigate all of the things that we inherited and consciously choose the legacy that we want to leave in the world. And this inspiration is what led me to decide to create Inheritance Project. The first thing I actually did was create an immersive theater piece about my inheritance with my mother and grandmother in the show live. Some of you are probably like, that sounds scary. And I will tell you, it was at times. It was definitely the going into the fire in which I was forged. And in doing that process and in asking myself, what have I inherited from my mother, my grandmother, from my ancestors, I realized that there are things that I've inherited that I'm so proud of. My talent, my singing voice, my storytelling ability. And there are also so many things that I inherited that keep me from being the best version of myself. Complex trauma, response to conflict that creates a dysregulated nervous system. A lot of things that are really complex and challenging. And I wanted to create the kind of world where we can talk about this openly and where we can do this work in community. And so I was drawn to Mallory and Ariel from the dance floor and from their unique life experiences and everything that they've lived through, that they also are at the intersection of so many cultures and identities and able to see beyond one point of view or another. And together we started to design this process. How do we unpack our inheritance? How do we understand our inherited beliefs? How do we understand our inherited nervous system patterns? And what can we do about it? And this is the work that we do now. And this is what we help organizations, teams, and now individuals do together as well. So that's a bit about me and about why this company was created and the work that we do. And a question that I wanted us to dig into together as a team. This is so fun because usually we just have these conversations amongst ourselves, and now we get to have it publicly in front of you, and you get to ask us questions too, and that's so exciting. So my question is, okay, we've been doing this work for 3 years. We have done leadership training in all myriad of different companies and industries and group sizes and age groups. What is one big lesson that you have learned about effective leadership and effective training programs, and maybe the intersection between the two?
I'm happy to share first. This may sound a little basic, but the biggest thing I've learned is how important it is to actually put the skills you learn into practice. And I say this as someone who used to work in a consulting firm in a corporate job, and I used to go to a lot of full day trainings that I think were over $1,000 for the full day. And there was zero follow-up to the training. And the day would be great. It would be amazing. I would learn new things. I would get inspired. And then the next day I would go back to my crazy day-to-day 6 different client projects going on and immediately drop back into the same behaviors and the same way of doing things. If you relate to this, put a comment in the comments, because I feel like I'm probably not the only one who's been through experiences like that. And one of the things that we learned early on is that, we're really an impact-driven organization. We really are here to change the way people are with others, to change the way people lead their teams and others. And that was not going to happen in just a one-off workshop. And so many people would call us, and still do, like, hey, we have all these really intense organizational challenges. Can you just solve it in a 2-hour virtual workshop? And unfortunately, it's not that easy. And I really learned that integrating new skills and new ways of behaving takes time. And a lot of the things that we teach in our programs, I've been working on in myself for the last 10 years or more, and I'm still working on them. And even though I've made a lot of progress and we have a culture as a team that has a lot of rapid feedback, and we really support each other to evolve and hold each other accountable to the way of leading that's aligned with our values and our standards. We are always making mistakes and learning. And how do you create an environment on your team where people are not afraid to put new skills into practice and actually maybe make a mistake or do it the wrong way and see that as a learning experience? So we have really put a lot of intention into the way that we craft our programs now, so they all happen over time rather than being one full day immersion. It's small bite-sized chunks over many weeks with space in between to really put the skills into practice, then get feedback, then come back to the group, get coaching, and be supported by a community that's all on the same journey, to bring a new way of being, a new way of leading into the world. And so integration and community support as a big part of that. Like, I also think that a lot of us are learning in silos. We may go to some courses here or there, but often we're in therapy alone, or we are reading books alone, or we're reflecting on things alone, or I've talked to so many people who are, the sole leader at their organization trying to push forward a certain new way of doing things. And it's really exhausting to do that without the support and the encouragement of a community, and also a community to hold you accountable to the values and the standards that you want to uphold. And so that's also why I'm really grateful to be on this team of 3 amazing co-founders. I think in our field, it's actually a little unique. There are a lot of independent consultants doing leadership development work. There are a lot of organizations started by a single founder. And while Katya was the original seed of Inheritance Project, I really appreciate, Katya, your vision of bringing together a team and creating something that's, more than you, that's about collective collaboration and community and support. And that's something that I really value. So integration and community support. Ariel, I'm wondering what your answer to this question is. What's something that you've learned, or your biggest lesson in the realms of leadership or effective training in the years of doing this work?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question a little bit last night, and one thing that came up for me was something that I came to when we were designing and developing the facilitator training program. They say you don't really know something until you have to teach it to somebody else. So as we were figuring out how to impart our methodology and our ideology to some different cohorts of leaders, one thing that came, and this is for a train the trainer program, where organizations would start doing our programming internally in their organizations. And one idea that we came to was that when we come into the facilitation space, that we're acting as facilitators, and we're not activists, and we're creating a distinction between those 2 roles. And both of these roles are very important, but they're very different. And an activist is someone who has a particular agenda that is looking to create change, sometimes to disassemble existing structures and create new ones. And this is a very important role. This is how so much of the beautiful transformation and evolution of our society and our cultures can take place. On the other hand, our role as a facilitator in the kind of work that we're doing, and one that's very needed right now, is one of being a bridge builder. And that means that you are not coming in and telling someone how they should think about about something in a certain way, but asking them to really look inside themselves and understand how their own worldview, how they relate to it, why they relate to it. Obviously, this is a lot of where our inheritance and our methodology comes in. But the idea is that our role is to step out and create the conditions where people can step out of the dualistic thinking, where they can step out of the combative way of relating to one another, and actually start to see that underneath and oftentimes see that underneath their particular viewpoint, they actually share the same values as somebody else, who may actually on the surface have a very different view of the way that things should be, have a different, to use the word used earlier, ontology about the world. And I think this is a really important and a really unique thing that's so needed in the world right now, where we have a very dualistic way of engaging in the public discourse, especially. It's something that is designed that way on purpose. It's a way in which we're educated to engage in this way. And so I think that the role that we play is very important in allowing people to step out of that and see the nuances of other people's viewpoints, and come to the table and so creating those conditions, and allowing people to come to the table in a more open way, comes out of being oriented towards being a bridge builder as opposed to an activist. And that's something that for my journey has shifted working with Inheritance Project. I definitely had an inheritance that I came in with, and over the course of doing this work and being in a lot of the kind of conversations that we're in, and practicing using the tools that we teach, have more and more started to see the places where I actually am putting my agenda into a space. So yeah, I think that's a really important role that we play, and that a lot of people are playing, that has been really fundamental to, I think, our success and the impact that we've made over these last couple of years. Mm-hmm.
Mm. What's so beautiful about both of your shares is this theme that keeps coming up for me, from me to we, and that I really feel that is this thread through our work, and there's a dual meaning to it. First, that if we want to transform anything, right, or we want to change a behavior, or we want to make the world a better place, one of our key threads of our philosophy is that it starts with us, right? It starts with, first I have to look at how I have inherited all of the things that I want to dismantle in the world. It all lives inside me. And just to go back for a second to what you said, Mallory, about inviting both of you to be equal founders in the company, there was so much information and advice out there when I was starting Inheritance Project that was like, you should be the only founder, and don't share with others, and this is how you build a business, this is how you do it, right? All of these big narratives around what is going to be successful and not going to be successful. And I had to ask myself, do I want to build a company that recreates the very same systems that I think are not serving other people? No. That means it has to start with me. It has to start with me making a different choice and saying, we're going to be equal on this team, and we're all going to have equal ownership in this company, which is a very different way of creating a startup than what exists out there, right? So that's one example. I also think that it's true about from me to we in terms of facilitation and looking at the whole, right? It's saying I need to do my work, but then I need to take care of the whole. And we have a lot of people who are advocating for their point of view in the world, but who's taking care of the whole? And that is the work that we are helping people do. And the tools that we're empowering people with is the tools you need to actually think of the whole group and bring people together so that they can do this work themselves. And the last thing I want to say about the me to we idea is that I found myself observing a lot of leadership teams when I was a team building facilitator. I would go in for 5 years to the top leadership teams in over 100 different companies in the US. And what I found is that most of the trainings and most of the conversations were all on the surface level of behavior. They were not actually looking at the root cause of any of that behavior, because we had this inherited idea that you should leave the personal at home, right? Don't bring your dirty laundry to work. Don't bring your personal problems into the meeting. But guess what? Our bodies are carrying all of the nervous system reaction from our lifetime of experiences into that same meeting. And if we're not talking about that, if we're just avoiding it, right? Trying to not have a conversation around our emotions, around our nervous system, around the way that we are experiencing life, then we can't actually connect, relate, or make real meaningful change. So part of the work that we do is teaching people that the personal development work that you do to understand yourself, it translates directly into professional development. The way that I lead myself through a really challenging experience, if I know how to do that and I have the tools, then I can actually guide others. Then I can actually become a leader and share that with other people and take care of the group. So one of the biggest lessons that I have learned in our work is that this all sounds great in theory, and we like to think about culture change as this like kumbaya moment where we're all going to be holding hands and singing and looking at this bright future. And I wish that was the case. But the reality is that real change requires really challenging conversations. It requires being uncomfortable. It requires saying the thing that nobody wants to say. And if we don't have the tools to have those challenging conversations, then we will never be successful in implementing the kind of changes that we really need to implement in order to move out of an individualistic worldview. And so these are the tools that I so desperately needed, right? Again, coming back to me, I am someone who inherited a really intense inheritance from my upbringing, you know, being an immigrant, coming from a really traumatized, war-torn country, coming from like 70 years of oppression. So I had a lot of things to dismantle within myself. And the 7 skills for challenging conversations that we're teaching in this upcoming training, they were designed by us needing these very tools on our own team to relate to each other, to actually do the kind of work internally that we wanted to guide other people to do in their organizations. So again, starting with me, starting with what's inside and then leading to the outside. And so the thing is that you can't really make meaningful change without a group of people who are willing to be in the uncomfortable figuring out together, right? Who are willing to have that sticky conversation where I disagree with you and you disagree with me, but we're actually going to stay engaged and conscious and regulated so that we can actually find common ground together and make a better solution together than either one of us would have made on our own. And so how do we teach everyone these tools became the question that I felt burning in my body when we started using them as a team. And I want to open up a little bit about that, you know, about the ways in which we use these 7 skills internally as a team, because I think it will speak to why we teach these skills out in the world and to all of the people that we're able to reach. So I want to ask a question around let's talk about briefly what the 7 skills are. Maybe I can pass to you, Mallory, to give us a brief overview. And then what's one way that you've used this skill in our work as a leadership team, as a co-founding team?
Sure. These are 7 skills. They're not linear or sequential necessarily. So they're not like, do these neat 7 things in this order and everything will always turn out perfectly. Unfortunately, real messy human interactions aren't that simple. But they are a series of skills that if you practice them will lead you to deeper understanding and connection with the people you work with, especially those people who you may be having a really challenging time collaborating with. Maybe you are a founder of a startup and you're having a real difference of opinion with your co-founder or your investor, or maybe you're on a leadership team at work and there's one of your peers who you just don't see eye to eye on anything, and these kind of situations are keeping you up at night. So these are the skills that can help you deal with all of these kinds of really challenging work situations that honestly were some of the biggest challenges about entering the workforce that no one ever trained me on. I got a lot of onboarding and technical skills training, but no one really taught me how to deal with the hard moments around other people. And these were kind of things that I had to learn on my own, and really wish that we could have like a boot camp in how to deal with conflict, difficult situations. You're a manager who's driving you crazy. How do you actually handle those kinds of moments? And so this is our synthesis of our combined 3 lifetimes study and learning of human interaction, teams, collaboration, education, leadership development. And for me, the most powerful one is actually number 1, pause and breathe. I didn't share this at the beginning, but I also teach breathwork, yoga, meditation outside of Inheritance Project. I've been on that journey since I was 19 years old, and it's become a huge part of my life. And I honestly credit being on that path and having the skills of breath and meditation as to how I was able to succeed in a very stressful, high intensity, fast paced corporate environment where I was often managing multiple different clients at the same time. And the as I started, doing these practices over the years, I became really interested in, why does this actually work? Like, what's actually going on scientifically in your body when you're changing the way that you breathe, and it's having such an effect on how I feel and how I'm able to show up and communicate with others. And so I started studying with doctors, neuroscientists, psychologists to understand some of these things. And now there's an incredible amount of research on these topics that has really been evolving especially over the last 5-10 years or so. But the biggest thing that I learned is that when our body's in a state of stress, which often happens if we're in a conflict, right? What's really going on in our body is it's entering a survival reaction. There's some kind of subconscious thing that's happening that makes us feel like we're under threat. So, that's totally understandable if you're in a conflict with your manager or a peer or your investor, because that's your livelihood under threat. That's your ability to survive and feed your family. And subconsciously, your body's reacting to that. And so it puts you into this fight or flight physiology. And the challenge with that is that fight or flight is great responding to threats like, a bear or a predator in our environment, which is how these reaction systems evolved in our nervous system over human history. But that same response of fighting or running might not actually work well when you have to show up and work with your boss every day. And I noticed that in my interactions with people, just in idea generation meetings at work, people would get very stressed and worked up if someone disagreed with their opinion. And I started to understand that it's because of the survival reaction kicking in. And when that happens, interestingly, we lose access to the prefrontal cortex, which is this very front part of our brain. It's actually unique to humans. It's what makes humans different from every other mammal or animal out there. And it's what gives us access to empathy, creativity, logic, collaboration. And when we're in that state of stress reaction, survival reaction, fight or flight, we lose our access to the prefrontal cortex. We lose the ability to empathize with others, to come up with creative ideas. I mean, you all know this from experience. Think about a moment when you're really stressed. That's probably not the best time to ask you, like, come up with this great creative idea to this very hard problem. And most of the problems that we're facing as leaders in our organizations are very challenging and very complex, more complex than ever before in human history. So we need that prefrontal cortex. We need our creativity, our ability to relate to others, our ability to collaborate. And so that's just a little bit of my science nerd out on the breath and why it's so valuable. But I noticed this was I had taken a lot of leadership, public speaking trainings in my career as a consultant and a facilitator, and none of them ever addressed the body or the nervous system, or the fact that, I would often get advice in those kinds of programs like, well, it's really important for a leader to be open to feedback. It's like, that sounds great in theory, but what happens when your body outside of your conscious control is receiving that feedback as a threat to your survival? How do you actually navigate that? And I felt that no one was giving real tools or addressing this really important aspect of human behavior. So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's one of the reasons why pausing and breathing as one aspect of skills to bring your body, using specific science-backed techniques to bring your body back into a state of calm so that you can access your creativity and your empathy, your ability to connect with and solution with other people is so important. And we teach really specific techniques. We also help you understand, what are those situations that lead to that kind of reaction, because it's different for everyone based on your inheritance, based on your specific unique life situations. And just one other side note is another thing that often frustrated me in trainings, especially about leadership, is that they're often taught from a very universalist perspective. Like, here's this framework, everyone go apply it. equally without regard to the fact that we're actually all coming in from such vastly different human experiences, like completely different identities, different backgrounds, different cultures, different contexts. And something that I love about the 7 skills is that they are an invitation to explore your own unique context and give you skills that, yes, you can use in any context, but that you can also adapt to your own unique background and offer an opportunity to explore your own inheritance rather than trying to force fit someone else's framework onto your life, which might be coming from, a completely different background or set of life experiences. So that I could talk about the 7 skills all day and why I love them. But in summary, breath has really changed my capacity to show up. And I think on our own team, something like Katya and I, we used to have a dynamic where we would often strongly disagree about things and get into a kind of oppositional, tense relationship and become really entrenched in our own position, like really advocating for one side or the other. And over time, as I've come back to my breath and come back to these skills, we've really been able to transform that into, okay, when we both have different ways of seeing things, like where we go is, okay, what's good about your perspective, what's good about your perspective, and what's the creative solution that integrates the value in both, that integrates the needs that's been surfaced in both. And I think that's been such a powerful transformation in the way that we work from using these skills in our own team. And I'll pass that over to you, Ariel, to share a bit more about your experience using some of these skills.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I feel like in honor of our birthday, I feel like I wanted to touch upon something, a very significant experience that's on topic that feels really important to acknowledge. I mean, to all of you, but I think also as an example to folks that are listening, which is about maybe a year ago now, 6 months to a year ago, the interpersonal dynamics of our team became so stressed and so difficult that we saw that we actually needed outside support and did a series of mediations where all of us came down and sat down at the table and really started to unpack what was going on. And I think this is really important to acknowledge as one, it's probably the reason we're still here, that we're still here all together. Two, it was very much influential in our developing the 7 skills, and some of the main pieces of this methodology were borrowed from that process. Elements of it were borrowed from nonviolent communication, and I think something that what ultimately came out of that mediation was a deepening of all the relationships, was an understanding of how our behavior was affecting one another, and concrete strategies and specific requests that could be put into place and practiced so that our relationship could continue to be strengthened, be healthy, heal, and ultimately go on to impact all the people that we hope to impact. And so I think that just from a kind of zoomed out perspective, one of the essential and really unique things about this program and this series of skills is that it kind of reframes conflict itself. And most of us would agree like that and have been socialized to think that conflict is something that is detrimental to the harmony and good and proper functioning of a system. We have conflict resolution with the a lot of conflict resolution has the goal of ending the conflict and moving from conflict to negotiation. If you're a leader, you're like, people pay a lot of money to make sure that conflict is not present in their organization. But part of this overlooks the fact that conflict is inherent to people working together. And not only is it inherently part of that system, but it's an important way in which we can evolve, which we can transform, which we can create solutions. Conflict leads to resolution. And so sometimes avoiding conflict and kind of quieting the conflict actually makes us unable to move forward. And we come into situations where there's stalemate, where there's interpersonal dynamics that fester and cause more damage. People will leave a job if there's enough conflict. People will leave their job. I know there's a one study that says I forget the numbers, but most people's mental health is highly correlated to their relationship with their manager. When you and your manager are not doing well, it affects everything in your life. So addressing conflict in a healthy way and having the tools to do that is really essential. And I think one of the things that stands out for me is noticing stories and assumptions. And I think that when I came into that mediation, and this is true for all people who work with other people, we make up stories and assumptions so that we can move along and function in an efficient way. And it's both in the process of the work that we do, as well as in our relationships. But oftentimes those assumptions are our own stories and not actually reflective of the reality that we're in. So bringing those to the table and being able to identify where those stories can actually be unraveled, perhaps where they are true, perhaps where they need to be addressed, and other areas where there actually are projections, is really, really, I think, a fundamental skill that that is really transformative and is essential to this process of being in healthy conflict and coming to conflict with the understanding that this is something that can help us create solutions and create innovation and create fill in the blank XYZ. So yeah, I wanted to name that as a piece that feels like a really big accomplishment for us to move through that, and something that we're also now doing for other people, like coming in to do interventions and help people come back into communication with one another.
Thank you so much, Ariel, for sharing that. And again, an inherited belief, like, don't ever tell everyone that you struggled as a team through anything. Wouldn't that be such a lie? Because we're human beings. And I think that part of the work we do is holding center to our work humanness, nuance, and complexity. And really catching ourselves when we're moving into binary black and white thinking or polarized positioning. And what do we do when we sense ourselves moving into that space? And so I'm so grateful that you shared that story. And something I'll add to it is a really deep revelation for me as a leader was around taking feedback and accountability. And so I want to speak to that for a moment too, because I think these 7 skills also teach us how to do that in a healthy way, how to hold others accountable and how to hold ourselves accountable and how to receive feedback. And I think this is one of the most needed areas of improvement in so many workplaces and relationships beyond the workplace, right? In interpersonal relationships, we have people in our programs all the time saying these skills are what saved my marriage. Like, I came to this for work, but actually this is saving my marriage. And I can attest to that it's, these are the very same skills we're so passionate about sharing with you are the ones that we are using every day, all the time, to improve our relationship with each other. That's why we really trust and believe in them. And so a brief share from me, and the biggest skill for me has definitely been a combination of things. I will say pause and breathe for sure, is that I grew up in a household where making a mistake was very unsafe. And maybe you're listening to this and you start to recognize that you also maybe grew up in a household like this. For me, making a mistake in my household meant extreme and severe punishment, extreme and severe emotional abuse. So I learned to avoid making mistakes at all costs. And if, God forbid, a mistake was made, do everything in your power for it to not be your fault. Because to me, and what I inherited was making a mistake leads to punishment and abandonment. And if I make a mistake, I'm a horrible person. No one will ever want to be in business with me, be my friend, be in a relationship with me, and I will be punished and left in a corner. Turns out that's not true. Turns out it is possible to make mistakes and be accountable for them and not be abandoned by the people in your life. And I had to teach my nervous system that was true. And I think there's a lot of people who carry these invisible experiences around conflict and from their early childhood. You know, these patterns of fear-based responses. That was a fear-based response for me. And in acknowledging it and understanding that about myself, I started to recognize how every time feedback was brought to me about even the smallest thing, I was treating it like I was being put on trial, you know, and I'm about to be excommunicated from society. So I had to acknowledge that my ouch was so much larger than the pinch, and look at that from a space of compassion towards myself, and look at that from the context of my inheritance and why I am that way, so that I could find compassion towards myself and actually create space between feedback being given to me and how my body is responding. And now I can say that I actually love feedback and I want more feedback, and I'm actually able to be accountable because I know how to work with my nervous system. So these skills don't only help us in conflict, they also help us in receiving uncomfortable information about something we might have done or something we might have said. And in the world of leadership and inclusion, this is an essential skill. We need to be able to tell each other when something didn't go well, when something is creating tension in our body, and actually have the skills to find common ground, find resolution, and find deeper connection. Because what happened in the process of me realizing this was a deepening of all of my relationships and a recognition that there were so many people in my life who probably didn't know how to tell me this and didn't know how to point to this in a way that I could receive that feedback. And so this is a life-changing shift in my behavior that comes directly from these 7 skills. And so because we only have a few minutes left, we'd love to share more with you all who are listening about how we can guide you into elevating your leadership and creating more inclusive spaces with these skills. So I'd love to know if you would like to hear more, just type a 1 in the chat and we'll share more about the upcoming leadership immersion with all of you. It's starting on September 11th, and we are going to welcome our first cohort of evolutionaries to our 10-week Inheritance Project leadership immersion. So these 7 skills we've been talking to you for an hour about, these are the same skills that we are going to teach in this Inheritance Project leadership immersion. This is the first time we are ever opening these tools up to the public. So what you can expect to learn in this 10-week course are these 7 skills for having challenging conversations. I'm going to share a little bit with you about the course. Oh, there we go. So what you'll receive, you will learn the 7 skills for challenging conversations, and you will apply these skills to improve a real life working or personal relationship or sticky situation that you are experiencing now. So this is a practical training. You are going to choose something that is keeping you up at night. Are you in a tense situation at work with a co-founder, with a coworker, with your startup team, with your parent, maybe with your family? All of these contexts apply. You can choose any situation that you want to use these 7 skills throughout the 10 weeks. You'll also learn our top 6 inclusive leadership and facilitation tools to address conflict and challenging workplace dynamics. You will understand the concepts of inheritance and get to do a deep dive into the 5 C's of identity, and that is culture, country, creed, color, and class, the 5 C's that help shape your identity and the way you see the world and the way you behave in the world. And you'll get to examine and transform the inherited beliefs that inhibit you as a leader and contribute to unproductive team dynamics. You'll also develop greater awareness and empathy for all of the other people because you'll be in community. Again, you won't be doing this work alone. You'll be doing it with others who are on this journey with you in a space where you can share about your wins, about your losses, about your challenges, and get real personal feedback on your particular situation. And you will receive a LinkedIn certification upon completion of the course, as well as lifetime access to the content, our online learning portal, and our community chats. So all of this is for you over the course of 10 weeks. I know that there are many questions that people have about this program, and I'm going to stop sharing to address some of them. The first is around time. So 10 weeks sounds like a long period of time. But what I want to say is that these, like Mallory was saying in the beginning, we are sharing this content in 2-hour workshops every other week. In between those weeks, you have an hour Q&A session where you get to bring your real challenges and actually workshop them with a real community of people. So it's not a immersive in the sense of every day for 10 weeks. It's 2 hours every other week, 1 hour for the Q&A, and a lot of exercises that you get access to in between. I will show you, because you're all here on this live stream, a sneak peek of the online learning platform as well, so that you can see how the course is laid out. And then I'd love to spend just a minute talking about some of the questions that people often have about this. So let me show you the behind the scenes. You all are getting the sneak peek. So this is our online learning platform and our inclusive leadership immersion. Every single piece of content is delivered to you here. You have onboarding, pre-work, every single session. You get specific somatic practices that help you regulate your nervous system that you get to practice every single week. You get to talk about your challenges with a small group of people. We have a myriad of additional resources for you to explore. This is one of my favorite ones, the Atlas of Emotions. If you haven't seen this, you should check it out, even if you don't take the course. And all of the course content lives here, including our feed where we get to share things with each other. You get to direct message any of the members. All of the events are listed here. So this platform is a one-stop shop for understanding the tools that you need, for connecting with everyone that is on this journey with you, and for having lifetime access to this content long after the course is finished. Let's talk about really quickly the two biggest objections that people have to this training that you hear, Mallory and Ariel, and what you would say to them. Let's talk about any of the things that you've heard that pass to you.
Well, I think you sort of already addressed this, but time and money, obviously. Like, this is a big investment of your energy, and 10 weeks sounds like a really long amount of time. And it's not just the live sessions, it is the reflection in between. But what I'll say about that is that this program is designed for those of you who really want to make some real changes. And maybe it's because you're unhappy in your relationships with your coworkers, with your investors, with your co-founders, with your boss, with your family. What if you have a particular sticky situation that you're dealing with, then those situations are not going to be resolved in 1-2 hour workshop or a one half day session. You are going to need to practice and work on these skills over time. So the design of this course is incredibly intentional to ensure that when you leave, you've actually made real progress on something really tangible in your life. And think about what that's actually worth to you. Like, imagine having the relationship with your manager or your investor or your founding team or whoever it is that really feels supportive and like it's moving you towards where you want to go. It does require some time and some energy to make some of those shifts. But the other thing that actually one of our amazing clients introduced us to this phrase, Julie. She introduced this phrase called hinge habits. And I really do think the 7 skills are hinge habits. They're small shifts, like just stopping to breathe or just stopping to notice your assumptions. It sounds like a small thing, but it opens a huge door in terms of what's possible to be different in that relationship and in your life because of it. And so it's really the practice of screwing these hinges into your nervous system operating system. I don't know if that metaphor quite worked, but really practicing these small, very practical shifts that can make a huge difference over time. So yes, this is for those of you who are really ready to make some big changes in your life and the way that you work. And the other thing I've heard is the investment. So right now, the early bird price is up until this Friday, I believe, and it's $1,440. And honestly, like I said earlier, I've been to one-day training programs with no resources, no follow-up that are priced similarly. And for the amount of content, coaching, integration, community that you receive, and care that you'll receive in this program from us personally, it's really actually an incredible deal when you break down what you're getting. And also, I know that many of you work at organizations that have professional development funds. So this is something that you could, if you are lucky enough to work at a workplace that has, some individual stipend for professional development, this is definitely something that you could use that you could put towards that. We have resources for you to go ask your manager, your boss for funding, and can support you in that communication process. And also, you may, even if your organization doesn't have that particular type of program, this might be something that your HR department or the leader of your team might have discretionary funds to be able to support. So it never hurts to ask. And I think there are a lot of resources out there for some of you that you could find to invest in this if this is something that you really want to do.
Thanks,
Katya,
Mallory.
Ariel, anything else you want to add?
I see a question from Keisha around, is there a limit to the size of the cohort? And we are going to, at the moment, the answer is no, there's no limit. So if you have a whole group of people that wants to join, they can join as well. Our course is designed so that no matter how many people there are, everyone is going to have a chance to have really direct and intimate attention placed on their particular situation or conflict. And what I want to say, because we are at time, is that we're giving all of you that tuned into our birthday celebration an extra special gift. If you register for this course by midnight tonight, you will also get a complimentary 60-minute one-on-one coaching with one of us co-founders of Inheritance Project. And that 60 minutes is where we get to devote all of our time, expertise, attention, and energy to your particular situation. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, I wish that I could just have a private lesson with one of the co-founders on how to use the 7 skills to approach my situation, we're giving that to you for free. We normally charge a lot of money for those one-on-one sessions, but we're throwing it in for free for anyone who registers for this program by midnight tonight. So if you want to share this live with your friends, your community, your workplace, and you want everyone in your family potentially to get a one-on-one coaching session with us, this is our generous offer. Thank you so much for tuning in to our birthday celebration, learning about us, our stories, our company, and why we're so passionate about the work that we're doing. And Ariel, I want to make sure you have a chance to say something too. Any last thoughts or words before we wrap up?
Just yeah, that I'm really excited. Just that I'm really excited to be able to offer this work to individuals, and it feels like another milestone. And I'm really glad that we've come to a place where we can make this available for anyone who has the desire to create that change in the way that they work and the way that they are in relationship to self and others. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining, and it was great to share and to talk with all of you, with both of you.
Thank you so much. And if you want to hear more about any of our stories, you can watch 10-minute long videos of us on our website. There's so much content there about what we do, who we are, and what we believe in. So if you're curious, go to inheritanceproject.org and connect with us. We're available. We're open. If you have questions, if you're on the fence, just reach out. We're happy to talk to you. We're happy to connect with you. And we hope that we can help you leave the legacy you want to leave. So thank you so much. You are history in the making.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.